So good morning from Vietnam. Thanks a lot, Todd, for joining our Inside Sharing show. Today, we are sharing your stories with the purpose to inspire people so that they can reflect, think, and make important change in their lives. So thanks a lot for joining and sharing your stories with our audience. Okay,
My pleasure. Greetings from New York City.
greeting from Vietnam. Todd, in our culture, it's going to be very honor for us if we can have our speakers to have to introduce about who they are. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Can you have to introduce who you are and the work that you do for our audience, please?
Sure, my name is Todd Cherches, and I am an executive coach based in New York City. My company is called Big Blue Gumball, and it's like a candy. It's a blue candy, but it's a metaphor that represents the world, the earth, or the globe. And we do management training, leadership development, executive coaching, team building, anything related to skills, people skills. We help people to be more effective. Additionally, I teach leadership at NYU and at Columbia University. At NYU, I've been teaching for 12 years, 8 years at Columbia, and I teach leadership in both programs. I'm also a TEDx speaker. I did a TEDx talk 2 years ago on the power of visual thinking. So most of the work I do is around visual thinking. And my book, which was published 2 years ago, is called Visual Leadership. There's actually one hanging up here. And it's all about how we can use visual thinking, storytelling, metaphors, frameworks, models to help people to see what we're saying. Because as business professionals and just as human beings, one of our biggest challenges is how do we get people to understand us? How do we get people to see what we're saying? How do you get an idea out of your head and into someone else's head?
Mhm.
Those are some of the things I help people do, and especially leaders.
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing that. And I understand that you had a lot of awards from the Thinkers 360s also. So we're gonna examine that all together because what people can see you and the work that you do now, but the journey from when you started up until now, not a lot of people is gonna understand about that. So my mission today is to unveil about that and understand it all together. So allow me to first bring you all the way back to when you were young. So when I was young, I always wanted to become an astronaut. So wearing the astronaut jumpsuit and then jumping on different planet, and it was very fascinating for me. But life didn't give me the opportunity, right? And for you, when you were young, what did you dream? One day you're gonna grow up and become what kind of person, what kind of job, what kind of like contribution you're gonna bring to this world? Can you share with us?
Sure. Well, I actually talk about this in my TED talk. I say when I was a kid, people would say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I would say, "I want to be Superman." That was my favorite TV character. And I used to watch the show, and I'd put a cape on and fly around the apartment. So, and then people would say, "Well, if you couldn't be Superman, what's your backup plan? What else would you like to be?" So I said Batman. So those were my two career goals, were to be either Superman or Batman. So unfortunately, those jobs were taken, so I couldn't do that. But as I got older, I always loved storytelling and comic books and superhero stories. So I actually majored in literature, so I used to read a lot of books growing up, and then I love television. So my next career aspiration was to work in the television industry, and so I got my master's degree in literature, and then my master's degree in communication, and then I worked in advertising for a year in New York, and then I moved to Los Angeles, which is where most Hollywood, where most TV shows and movies are filmed, and I moved out there, and I was out there for 10 years working in the entertainment industry. So even though I couldn't be Superman or Batman, the next best thing was to work in the television industry.
So how come from the like the television industry all the way transforming to the leadership development space?
Well, the one recurring theme in all my jobs was I had really horrible bosses, really terrible managers, bad leaders. So after working in the entertainment industry for about 10 years, I moved back to New York, and I
Mm.
didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I ended up with a job at a management training company just by accident, where they asked me to help revamp their leadership program. And in order to do that, I had to start reading a lot of leadership books. And as I
Mm.
started reading, I realized that management and leadership is an art and a science. It's something that you could study and practice and get better at. Because most people, as we know, don't receive any training. You're good at what you do, so you're just thrown into a manager job, and then you end up failing. Because
Mm.
just because you're a good salesperson doesn't mean you're a good sales manager. Just because you're a good IT person doesn't mean you're a good IT manager, right? It's a different skill set. So as I started to study management and leadership, I got very interested in it, and that's how I got hooked on management and leadership training and executive coaching and team building and all the things that I do today. So I always say, even though I couldn't be Superman or Batman, Superman had X-ray vision, and I have visual thinking as my superpower, and
Mm.
Batman had his utility belt with all his tools, and I have my visual thinking toolkit as my tools. And I help to make the world a better place and help to rescue people from failure through executive coaching and training and teaching, as I teach at NYU in Columbia. So in a way, I'm not a superhero, but I still get to help people through what I do.
Wow. I want to bring you back to the moment that the organization back then that decided to ask you to build up the leadership development program, because on one hand your experience didn't relate at all onto that space, the work that you do that they want you to do, they wanted you to do. So what happened back then that they say, Todd, please build up the program for the organization?
Yeah, I saw an advertisement for this job and I applied for it and I never thought I would get it. I mean, I had been a manager
Mm.
and I had managed people, and I really wasn't really qualified for that job, but they said I was a project manager, and this role originally was more of a project management type of job. When I worked in the theme park business, I was a project manager. I actually managed a theme park project in Shenzhen, China, which was my
Oh.
one time that I visited Asia. And I had project management experience, so they said this is like a project. You just need to learn. So I didn't have to be a content or subject matter expert. I just had to read all these books and meet with the other trainers and kind of together put this whole program together. So in the process of doing that, I learned a lot about management and leadership. I learned what I didn't know, and I learned some things that I did know. So that's a great question. So I really leveraged my project management background in the context of developing this program, and that's how I learned so much about management and leadership, and I just fell in love with that field. So then I've been doing that ever since.
And how did that journey evolve after from that point? Can you share?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was always as the designer of the program, I used to work with some of the trainers, and they would do the presentations and
Mm.
facilitate the workshops, and I always sat in the back of the room. I am an extreme introvert, even though I talk loud and fast, 'cause I'm from New York. I always say I'm a three B's guy. I'm a back of the room, behind the scenes bookworm. I'm much more comfortable reading books. I'm much more comfortable sitting in the back of the room and being behind the scenes. So I never
Oh.
in a million years thought that I would be in front of the room doing training and teaching and all the things that I currently do. So one time we were at a location doing a management training, and the facilitator got sick and missed his flight and didn't show up. So we needed someone to teach the day one of the 3 day training program, and they had no one else to do it. And I knew the content, and even though I was terrified of public speaking and terrible at it, I got up in front of the room and I did it, and it wasn't terrible, and I didn't hate it. And that was the first time I ever spoke in public. In all my years of school or any other jobs, I never spoke in public before. So by being forced into doing it because we had no other choice, and then I basically had to do it, and then I ended up later on, a few years later, took a public speaking course, and little by little, my skills got better. I got more confident, and now I teach at two universities. I've done a TEDx talk. I speak publicly all the time. I've done about 150 podcast interviews since my book came out 2 years ago. So now I do it all the time, even though it's still out of my comfort zone. It took me a long time to get to the point where I was comfortable speaking publicly.
Wow, from the guys running in the principle of 3B, right? So it's a behind the scene in the back room or on the book room, and then all the way onto very publicly, went to the TEDx to talk, teaching at the university, and then do a lot of podcast sharing about the works that you do. So how did you overcome all of that, like anxiety or public speaking and be comfortable doing that?
Yeah, like anything, it's practice. And I was just telling this to my NYU students the other night because they couldn't believe that I used to, I'm an introvert and that I used to be shy and scared of speaking publicly. I said, you have to push yourself. Just take baby steps, small steps. And like any skill, whether it's learning a musical instrument or a sport, you start slow, you start small, you take steps. As you get better, you get more confident. As you get more confident, you try and take more risks and you put yourself out there. As you take more risks and are more confident, you do it more often, and it's like this spiral. It's like this ball that keeps turning. That once with more skills, you get more confidence. You try it more, and then you just keep going. So that's basically what I did. I started small. I took a public speaking course. I got some coaching. I got good feedback, and it takes a long time. It's like years to get comfortable and to feel good at it. And sometimes I do still get the anxiety or the fear of public speaking. It's like fear of flying, right? I don't love flying, but if I fly a lot, then the more I do it, I almost forget about it. You just get on the plane like you're getting on a bus or a train. You don't think about it. But if I go a long time before I fly, I get that flying anxiety again. Same thing with speaking. If you speak all the time, you just do it and you don't even think about it. But if you go a long time in between speaking engagements, you start to have that self-doubt again and that type of thing. And that's really with anything. Same thing with social anxiety disorder. For a long time during the pandemic, we were all at home, but now that we're out in the real world again and going to meetings and going to conferences, I still get that, being an introvert, I still get that anxiety about going to, big networking events. And in fact, last month or 2 months ago, I went down to Nashville, Tennessee, here in the U.S., for a Marshall Goldsmith MG100 conference with Marshall and a whole bunch of other members of the MG100 communities, many of them that you know. So I got that anxiety of getting on a plane and traveling for the first time in 3 years and being around all of these people. Some of them I knew, others I didn't. But after a while, you get comfortable and you get confidence again. So we just have to keep pushing ourselves to try things and take risks, and little by little, our comfort zone expands and it gets bigger. So we're more comfortable more often in more places and more situations.
Wow. So do more, and then you get comfortable around that. How would the visual leadership help you to build that comfortability also?
Yeah, I mean, visual leadership is about applying visual thinking and visual communication to the practice of leadership. So if you say the word leadership, and I ask people, what's the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word leadership? Most people say vision. Leaders are visionary. You have a picture, and what do we mean by vision? It's about having a picture in our mind about a future that is different from and better than the current reality, right? So the job of the leader is to help make that vision of the future come true. And in order to do that, you have to have a vision that is clear, needs to be compelling, and needs to be inspiring if you want to get other people on board with that vision. So when you look at the future, visual thinking is about making pictures in your mind a reality. If you look backward into the past, the lens, both of us wear glasses, right? The lens through which we see the world has a lot to do with who we are and how we lead. So that's why the title of my book, I'll hold it up again for a second, it's one word with a shared capital L. And the idea behind visual leadership, spelled this way, is that who you are and how you lead, you can't separate the two. It's all part of who you are and what you do. It's about what you see and what you don't see, right? And if you look at on the cover, there's a rainbow-colored eye. The rainbow represents diversity, inclusion, belonging. Wow. The fact that no one in the world sees the world the same way you do. Even if you have a twin and you grew up in the same house, you still see the world through a different lens. So part of what we need to do as leaders is we need to, what I call, flip the eye, look internally at our own biases, assumptions, and belief systems, and question how we see the world, and realize that not everyone sees things the same way that we do. I'm sorry, my dog is barking in the background. We have two puppies. So basically, we need to see the world through a different lens.
I see. And I want to ask you this question also, Todd. Hey, are they okay?
Yeah, my wife is coming in, so that's why they're backing.
Yeah, it's
She'll be gone.
okay. I have two Labradors here at home also, so
Sorry about that.
yeah.
That's part of working from home, right? Is the challenges of dealing with noise and things like that.
But
So
that is how life
I
is.
think they'll stop now that she's home.
Sure. Hey, Todd. Now come back to the visual leadership thing. I want to connect. Connecting back the dots. Okay, so when you were little, you want to become a Superman. Okay, that job was taken. Then you want to
Yeah.
become a Batman. That job also taken, right? And Superman and Batman is also introverts, right? They also wanted
Yeah.
to create the world a better place their way. And then so the thought introvert person also now be able to create the world, a better place through the works that you do, through promoting the visual thinking, through promote visual leadership. And I want to understand, at what point did you come up to the idea of visual thinking and be an expert on that? Can you bring that back to that journey?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it's not something that happened overnight. It was from, being majoring in literature as a undergraduate, doing a lot of reading, right?
Mm,
Life is like a story. We're all the hero of our life story, right?
mm,
Stories have beginnings, middles, and ends. There are villains, victims, and heroes. There's usually a goal or a quest. There's always barriers or obstacles or challenges that stand in your way.
mm,
There's a resolution at some point, and then there are lessons that we learn, right? So there are success stories, there are failure stories, there are cautionary tales. There's all kinds of stories. So again, going back to the lens, coming from working in the television industry and advertising and reading a lot growing up, the lens through which I see the world is through television and literature and the arts. So that's when you take all of that and you apply it to coaching and you apply it to management and leadership. Like your boss, is your boss a hero or a villain?
mm,
Right? Are you a hero or a villain? If you have a goal, what's standing in your way? Right? Who can help you to achieve your goal? Who is your partner? Like Batman had Robin, right? Superman doesn't have a partner, right? So who could you surround yourself with in terms of your team?
mm,
What are your strengths? But also, all superheroes also have weaknesses, right? Superman had kryptonite, and so all of us have strengths and weaknesses. So we need to be aware of those things. So if you think of it as a metaphor, what superhero would you be?
mm,
Right? You said an astronaut, right? That's kind of a superhero in a way. It's like, what are the traits that an astronaut needs to be successful, right? So just thinking in those terms, that's part of visual leadership. So after doing management leadership training, I started studying all these different models, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the 4 quadrants of time management. So after studying all these models and using them in the courses, I started to develop my own models. So in my
mm,
book are a lot of the models and frameworks that I developed. And I love stories. So when I was teaching or training, I would tell stories, right? So I would capture a lot of those stories. I'd write them down. So I recommend to people, keep a journal, write down stories as they come to you. So when I sat down, and I kept, I read so many business books. I read an average of 1 business book a week. And I've been doing that since 1998. So
wow.
20, how many years is that? 22 years,
24.
24 years?
Yeah.
So 50 a week times 24 years is over 1,200 business books that I've
Mm,
read since then. So after reading them and quoting them and teaching them, people started saying to me, when are you going to write your own book? Because I
mm,
started to tell my own stories and use my own models. So I ended up writing everything down and saying someday I'll write a book. But it wasn't until a friend of mine who had a book published introduced me to his agent, and his agent we worked on a proposal and I got a book deal. That once I had a publisher, I had 9 months from signing the contract to delivering my first draft, and I had about 2,000 pages of content accumulated, models and quotes and images and everything else. I had to take that and turn it into a book in 9 months, which I did. And the first draft, after just a few revisions, ended up being the book that came out about 6 months later. So it definitely was a journey. It didn't happen overnight. It's not like I sat down and said, okay, I want to write a book and stared at a blank screen. I had 15, 20 years of life experience, work experience, and stories to tell, and models I created, and metaphors and images that I include into the book. So my book is around 300 something pages, if I included everything, it would have been 1,000 pages. So sometimes you have to decide what to. I would say sometimes it's harder to decide what to leave out than what to put in. And then I had to figure out what order or what sequence or structure to use so that the book itself has a beginning, middle, and end. So it was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's really to actually hold it in your hands after carrying it around in your head for 15 years is an amazing feeling.
I want to say congratulations on that, Todd. A lot of my executive friends they have two things that they regret by the time that they retire. First one is they always wanted to run their own business when they were younger, but they didn't, for some reason. And you did run your own business for a long time now, so that's first one. I want to congratulate you. Second is they wanted to write a book about whatever their area expertise or the experience they've been having leading organizations, and they haven't write it yet. So we always recommend them to never too late to start writing, never late to start like running your own business, right? And you've done both, so I want to congratulate you for that. And that is too much for an introvert person also with the three B's. Right, so for the book, I want to ask you this because thinking is hard. So that's why a lot of people already, rather judging instead of thinking. So there's an old saying for that, right? And now even put thinking into visual, it's even a lot harder. Like how can I take a baby step to start visualize and create? Am I thinking through visualizations? In your expertise, can you help sharing that?
Yeah, I mean, there's that classic saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, right? So you need to take that first step. I always say the difference between 0 and 1 is much bigger than 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 100, right? Going from not doing something to doing even a little bit is a huge, gigantic Grand Canyon, right? Once you start, so if you want to write a book, a book, just as a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, a book of 300 pages begins with a single word, right? So you need to start with that first word, that first sentence, that first paragraph, that first chapter, and little by little, before you realize it, you have a book, right? So it's not that easy, but a lot of my book were blog posts, right? So if you have an idea, you can put something out there as a blog post, and that that one blog post that you put on LinkedIn or on your own blog, that could be a chapter of your book. So, like I said, about 20% of my book was already out there in terms of blog posts that I was able to use as content. As you think of different models or frameworks or stories to tell, write those down, and little by little, they all add up. So same thing, it's like you're not going to never speak and then all of a sudden do a TED Talk or teach at a university. You need to take baby steps along the way. And Steve Jobs of Apple, he said we can't connect the dots looking forward, we can only connect them looking backward, right? So if someone says, how did you get to where you are today? I could look backward and connect the dots and say, right? So like I did that, I created that leadership program for that management company, and that led to my taking a public speaking course, which led to my meeting someone who hired me at a company to be their head of leadership development for 3 years. And when I created this leadership institute, a friend of mine heard about that who taught at NYU, so she introduced me to NYU, and I got asked to teach at NYU. Once I started teaching at NYU, I was able to teach at Columbia. Someone asked me to teach at Columbia, right? Teaching at Columbia and NYU, and having led to my confidence to do a TED Talk, right? So while I was working on my book, so I did the TED Talk. Doing the TED Talk and writing my book led to my being selected for Marshall Goldsmith's MG100 coaches. That wouldn't have happened without the book or the TED Talk, right? And then that led to my being considered for Thinkers 50 as one of the top 8 nominees for the Leadership Award in 2021, right? And then Thinkers 50 came, Thinkers 3. So I was Thinkers 50, and then Thinkers 360 named me to 2 of their lists: the top management thinkers and top design thinkers, right? So if I had said I want to do all of these things, it never would have happened. But one thing led to another, and you add them all up, and it's, you look at this, my bio or resume, and I never could have pictured that 15 or 20 years ago, right? So if I said this is what I want to do, it never would have happened. So it wasn't by accident but it was one step, one step, one step, and you add them all up, and that led to what I've done today, right? And who knows what's next, right? So people say, are you writing another book? Or, right now I just want to relax a little bit, keep building my business and my clients and everything else, and start applying, do more application and more executive coaching and more management leadership training and all those kinds of things. But so when I think back to my story and reflect back, that's what I would say is like, picture where you want to be, but you have to take small steps to get there. Sometimes my students will say, I want to do what you're doing. And I'll say, well, just flounder around for like 15 years, have bad bosses, get laid off, get fired, make mistakes, all of those kinds of things. Because without any life experience, how can you coach other people, right? How can you train other people if you haven't experienced some of these things yourself? So I think that's what I would say is, it's great to have that goal of doing something or being something, but you need to take the steps and pay the dues. And, you're not going to go to be a concert pianist, before you even can press one key on the piano, right? So everything starts small, whether it's a sport or a musical instrument or whatever. We have to start somewhere and build from there.
With that being said, if 15, 20 years ago, you didn't even think about, the future that could be, fantastic that it is right now. And then the upcoming future also is going to be a lot more adventurous, as a lot more, amazing for you. So for a lot of people, Todd, living in this world, and they don't have the vision of the future also, so they keep in carry on of the daily and tasks and stuff. So you are helping leaders to create the vision. You say that clear, compelling, and so if our audience out there wanna create a vision from now, so that they can connecting the using the connecting the dots backward and then head into the future with their vision, where can they take the baby steps to start?
Well, one of the models in my book is called the Passion Skill Matrix. It's chapter 17. I'm going to hold it up here for a second. And I can't explain the whole model, but actually, if people watching this, if you go to my website, www.toddcherches.com/passion, you could download this chapter for free. You just have to put in your email address and you can download it. So you can get a free chapter. This chapter for free from my book, and you'll read about it and you can see my model. But basically the idea behind the Passion Skill Matrix is you need to think about, from a scale of 1 to 10, what are you good at and what are you not good at? And what are you passionate about, and what do you like to do or love to do, and what do you not like to do, right? So in the upper right corner of this model, and I'm explaining it visually even though I'm not showing it to you, the upper right corner of this model is your sweet spot. When you're doing something you're great at and something you love, that's where you shine. That's where time flies by. I always say, what do you want to be known as the guru of or the go-to person for? What is the stuff that when you do it, you really excel, right? And you're successful. So that's your sweet spot. The upper left corner is your growth zone. That is where you're not great at something yet, but you have an interest in it or a passion for it. So you're willing to work at it and try. The lower right corner is your default zone. That's where you're good at something, but you don't necessarily like it or love it. And the lower left corner is your failure zone. That's where you're not good at it and you don't like doing it, and you've tried very hard to get out of this box, right? So we all start, none of us are born in the sweet spot, right? You need to start in your failure zone. Maybe not a failure, but you're not great at something. Then you move up towards your growth zone and you work at it, you try, you practice, you fail, you get feedback and coaching. And then over time, some of those things, if you're lucky, move into your sweet spot where you love to do it and you're great at it. Now, if you lose your interest in something, even if you're good at something, it could drop down into the default zone where you do things on autopilot and your heart's not in it and you just go through the motions. A lot of times we hear about quiet quitting right now, that topic of quiet quitting. So that's where you may do something, but you're just showing up. You're just doing the bare minimum, and because you're not passionate about it anymore. So for me, as an example, I would put public speaking in the failure zone because I was terrible at it and terrified of it, right? But once I tried to do it and once I started and I realized, I'm not that bad, and the more I practiced, the better I got, it kind of inched its way into the growth zone over time, and now it's a sweet spot. right? So all of us have to start somewhere and move up and move over. So it's like, even though it's a 4-box matrix, it's kind of like a cycle in a way, right? Because if you're in the default zone, if you stop working towards something, that thing that used to be a sweet spot can now fall into the failure zone. Because you basically, you just did it without really putting your heart and soul into something. So that's the model that I would most recommend for people. If they could plot out what they like to do and what they don't and what they're good at and what they're not, that will give you some insight in terms of career possibilities, or where you should spend your time, or things that you want to work at, etc. Right? So if you're not good at something, you might partner with someone who is good at it, and together that person can mentor you or coach you or give you feedback to help you learn from the wisdom of their experience. So you're not stuck. Wherever you are, you're not stuck, because we all have our strengths and weaknesses. But out of all there are other models out there, but this one in particular I use with all my coaching clients and my students, and it seems to resonate with people because it helps you to kind of, we always talk about thinking outside the box as a cliche, but you can't think outside the box until you have boxes and something in it. So by putting, life is messy and complex. So if you can figure out a way to put things into a structure or a framework, it helps you to see it more clearly, think about it more clearly, make better decisions, and take actions, because you could visualize, all right, if I move this to this box or this to this box, and get out of this box, then if you're spending all your time below that line on a scale of 0 to 10, if you're below 5 in a lot of your, that's where people are unhappy with their job or their life, if you're doing something that you're not passionate about or interested in or good at, right? So you want to, and again, there's always aspects of our job that are not in the sweet spot. So if you're spending 80% of your time in above the line between the sweet spot and the growth zone, then you're usually pretty engaged in what you're doing and you're happy with your job. Because there's always aspects that we don't love or that we don't like. That's just normal. But if you're spending all your time beneath the line, that could be an indication why you're not happy in your career or your job, and you need to figure out, all right, what are some other options out there.
So what you mean by, if we in this box, we can jump into a different box, and if we, even if we in the sweet box, that sometimes that it can also go back to the failure box if we don't manage it well, right?
Yes, yeah.
So for our audiences, follow here, and Todd's advice is go to his website and you put your email in, and you can download the whole chapter 7 to find your sweet spot in the work that you do also, right, Todd?
Yes.
Alrighty. That's one thing that my wife and I really interested to do, is to help people to improve their ability to think. Okay, because for a very long time, Vivian and I, so her name is Vivian. So Vivian and I were have been in the quest for, looking for how people think, because we believe that the ability to think that our people out here and nowadays diminishing, is not increasing. So in your line of works, and connecting all the dots back, the unsatisfactory of the jobs were taken, of Superman and Batman, they're leading you to a different path in your life. There was a lot of thinking involved in here, and we want to ask you for the secret of that. Okay, so if anybody who listened to the advice that you share, they can reflect, they can take some and hold ear to that and apply, so that can help them to improve their ability to think. So Todd, how do you help in yourself to expand your ability to think?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to answer that there is no magic wand, right? You can't just wave a magic wand and magically change things. So it takes time and it takes effort and it takes work, right? So I mentioned I read a lot. So every time, when you read, you learn. When you watch TED Talks, you learn. When you talk to other people, if you want to be a coach, get a coach, right? So if you want to be a teacher someday, take a class, right? So we all learn. Marshall Goldsmith wrote the book "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." That's one of my favorite leadership books of all time, right? So that tells us that what got us to where we are today is great, but that's not going to get us to where we want to be unless we close that gap, unless we find a way to overcome. The subtitle of that book is "The 20 Workplace Habits You Need to Break." Sometimes people are successful not because of how they are, but in spite of how they are, right? So a lot of times we have things that are holding us back. So what are those things that are holding you back, right? So that book was very inspirational. he quotes Peter Drucker, the management guru Peter Drucker, in his book, Marshall does, saying that we teach leaders what to do, but we don't teach them what to stop doing.
Yep.
Right? So what are some of the things, and one of the models in my book is called Stop, Start, Continue. What are the things that are working for you that you want to continue doing? That's a yellow light, if you picture a traffic light. What are the things that are not working for you that you need to stop doing? That's the red light. And then the green light is what are some things that you haven't done yet that you need to start doing? It could be start reading more, start watching more TED Talks, take on more responsibility in your job, talk to your boss, take more risks, whatever those things are. Again, it's not easy. Like when I look back, I had a lot of times of where I was in between jobs, or I got laid off, or I had to bounce back after my last job. Before I was the head of leadership development for a Wall Street financial services company for 3 years, and I loved my job. And then the economic crash happened, and I got laid off, so I was out of work. So I had two choices: to find another job or to start my own company. And I started my own company. Right. So those are all choices that we need to make. And even if you start your own company, you start with 0 clients, right? And then you need to get your first and your second, and you build a business. So that's what we need to keep remembering. Everyone wants, everyone thinks they could be the next Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or whatever. There's only one of each of those, right? But so we need to start somewhere. Think about what you're good at, what you like to do, you're right. You're. I always say that in the story of your life, you're the hero of your own life story, and you hold the pen, right? So, but it's up to you to write the first words in the first chapters, and sometimes you need to rip the page out and start all over again, right? So, using that metaphor. So again, it's not easy, but it's good to, like, if you have a vision of doing something, talk to someone else who's already a few steps ahead of you, and pick their brain and find out how they started and because some things, everyone's going to have a different journey, but you can still learn from each person's successes and failures, right? So no one has just like I mentioned with the rainbow eye, no one sees the world the same way you do. Similarly, no one has the exact same career path that you do, and there's no one path that will guarantee you going from point A to point B or point Z, right?
Yep.
So that's what I would say is learn, look at everything as a learning opportunity and a teachable moment. Talk to people and realize that there are going to be bumps in the road and setbacks. I did a workshop this afternoon for a group of HR people, and a lot of times we use the metaphor of having a career path. A career path sounds like it's some walk in the park, like there's some road or stepping stones laid out for you. There's no career. I said my career, it was not a path, it was a roller coaster.
Yep.
Right? Ups and downs and scary, exciting plummets and twists and turns. Most careers are. Very few people have a linear career path that one thing leads to the next. So we need to be resilient. We need to learn, and you need to just keep bouncing back and say, what's next, right? So you just got to keep. That's what you say. Like, what can I? Nelson Mandela had that saying, "I never lose. I either win or I learn."
Yep.
Right. So just keep that in mind. That look at everything as a learning. Even if you win, you still need to learn. Otherwise, you may not win the next time, right? So look at everything as a learning opportunity.
Wow. You mentioned one thing is very important, and a lot of people, when we at the winning stage, we forgot to learn. Okay, and that's it make the organization going down. So I want to ask you the next question is this: you were saying that the hardest thing is coming from 0 to 1. And then from 1 to 2, 2 to 10, 10 to 100 is a lot easier. So when you first started your organization, and then how do you still remember the first client, how it feels for you?
Yeah. Well, I was very lucky in one way. The company that laid me off after working there for 3 years, they were my first client.
Oh.
So I lost my job, but they said, we still need you to do our training and coaching, only we can't afford to keep you on full time. So in fact, they even let me keep my office. Luckily, my boss and I were very good friends, and we're still very good friends. So they became my first client. So I just flipped from being an internal employee to an external consultant, trainer, and coach, and I continued working there, right? Then some of the other people who got laid off from this company, they got let go, and they went to other companies, and then they contacted me and brought me into their new company because they knew me and they had experience working with me. Also, I teach leadership at NYU in the HR Master's program. Some of my students, once they graduated, got jobs and contacted me to work with them, to do training or to coach their CEO, whatever. So again, it wasn't any one thing. All
Mm,
of my business was through word of mouth and referrals, but
mm,
it did start. My very first client was my former employer, so that
mm.
did help me make things a lot easier.
Wow. And a part of that is because you do a very good job with a very good heart also, Todd. Otherwise, they're not going to come back and ask you to support, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. But the hard thing when you work for yourself, you have to do all the business stuff that billing and negotiating contracts and having a website built and all of the things that you need to do.
hmm,
That when you work for a company, you don't have to do all those things; they're done for you, right? You
yep.
just show up for work and you get your paycheck. So that was to me the scariest thing about being an entrepreneur is it's like you're all on your own.
Yep.
And in my case, I had a business partner who was my brother, so we work together. Although now we work kind of separately. But all of those things you have to do, like getting pens made up with the company name on them, and all those kinds of things. You know, you don't even know where to start. Getting business cards made up, right? All of those things that you never had to do when you work for yourself, you need to. And how do you learn how to do it? You talk to other people who are, oh, you have a business card. Where did you get yours made up? Who designed it for you? Oh, you have a website. Who's a good web designer? So that's what you need to do is kind of be that project manager that I talked about before, and you have
Uh-huh.
to piece everything together, right?
Uh-huh. So now not sit in the back room anymore, but now you have to take
Yeah.
into the leading position.
Yeah, if you sit in the back room, you're not going to even have a room
Hmm.
after a while because you're going to, so you need to find a way to keep the lights on and pay the rent and all that kind of stuff.
Wow, thanks a lot, Tom. I'm gonna go to the last question of our session today, and that is something that we're gonna talk about the future. Okay, so like we've been connecting the dots back already a lot, so let's move forward a little bit. Is there anything, Todd, you are working on and exciting you want to share with me, with the audience, so we can celebrate with you in advance?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm continuing to teach at NYU.
Mm,
I've been teaching this one course for 12 years. I'm going to continue doing that and teach at Columbia also. Again, I'm continuing to promote my book. Same thing, like when you write a book, if you have a name, if you're famous like Marshall Goldsmith or Dan Pink or Seth Godin, you write a book, you put it out there, and everyone buys it.
mm,
When people are saying, "Oh, visual leadership, what is that?" and Todd Churches, I never heard of him,
mm,
right? That's how do you sell your first book, right? So you start selling it to friends and families, friends and family and people who know you, and then you publicize on social media, LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, etc. And little by little, just like everything, it picks up and word of mouth and that type of thing. So I want to continue to get my book out there into the world, and hopefully more people will buy it and read it. And part of being a thought leader has two components. There's the thought and there's the leader, right?
mm.
So you can have a thought and an idea and a book, but it's the leadership side that gets your idea out there into the world and changes hearts and minds. And so I'm hoping that visual leadership continues to pick up steam in terms of catching on with people, because it is a different way of looking at leadership and I break it down to four categories: using visual imagery and pictures and drawings, using mental models and frameworks, using metaphor and analogy, and using storytelling and humor. Those are my four kind of categories, and that's what the book is all about, and that's what all my workshops are all about. So, for the future, it's just about spreading the word about visual leadership, visual thinking, and visual communication to help people to be more effective by seeing the world through a new lens. And
Mm.
all of us need to get people to see what we're saying, and that is my catchphrase and my mantra, and that's my goal. And my mission statement is making the world a better place, one leader at a time. And
Mm.
to me, everyone is a leader, right?
Wow.
So we're not talking about title or position. We're talking about how can you be the leader of your own life and the
Mm.
manager of your own life. And then when you can manage and lead and inspire other people, then you'll have an even greater impact. So that's what I'm trying to do, is making the world a better place through the superpower of visual leadership.
Wow. Thanks a lot for having that big mission in your life, Todd, to change people one at a time. And and the world is changing so fast, and we cannot keep seeing everything through our own lens, right? We have to adopt a new lens, recreate a new lens, and even build the lens that not even existing, so that we can see things that in multiple dimension, in different different views. So for our audience out there, if you want to learn about visual leadership, and if you want to change the way that you see and through your lens, it's through the lens of others, right? It's in the different lens. Please look out for Todd's book, Visual Leadership, and we're gonna share the link for the book in on the post so that you can look out for the book and start to buy it and read it. All right. So Todd, thanks a lot for spend your late evening to join our shows and sharing your story. It was fascinating, and it's lovely to know you and to connect. I wish you all the best. I hope
Thank
one day that when I travel to the US to see my daughter there, I will be able to swing back to New York and say hello to you and your wife. Okay.
That would be great. I would love that. So thank you. Yeah, and Big Blue Gumball, the name of my company, represents the world, the earth, and the globe, right? So it's the world is like a big blue gumball. So it is getting smaller. Like before Zoom and before Teams and before the pandemic and before social media, we never would have even met,
Yep.
right? So it's through LinkedIn and through our networks. So here you're in Vietnam and I'm in New York and we're having a conversation, right? So, anyone out there is reachable, right? You can learn from anyone, you can connect with anyone. So that's part of being successful is to expand, again, speaking as an introvert, not easy, but build your network, connect with people, reach out to them like you reached out to me. And now I know someone in Vietnam and, we have a new friendship and we'll continue supporting each other on social media and hopefully meet someday.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you ever travel to this part of the world, please let us know also. Okay, so we will be so happy to take you guys around.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Todd. I have a wonderful day or evening. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye for
Great
now.
talk.